Welcome to Breathing is Action, a meditative affirmation podcast aimed at reaching teens and adults, everyone, everywhere. I'm your host, Macie. Hi guys, I hope you are doing well. I am seeing that I'm still having a little bit of trouble with the recording process. I feel like it's very frustrating. I don't really know the process that works the best for me. I have recorded this so many times. It's infuriating. But at the same time, I'm every time I just put in the action, put in the effort, I'm going to learn more and more. I'm having a hard time with either the flow of things. I don't know if I want to write things out or just go with the flow and try to talk through things verbally and, kind of off the cuff. And it's just sometimes I talk way too fast and then sometimes I talk way too slow. It's kind of like it's a weird scenario. Anyway, so today I wanted to get into some of the things that we talked about in the last episode. We are at meditation, having a voice. There are some topics I really want to get deeper into, and I think that they're very interesting. There's lots of things to work with. There's a lot of interesting things to get into. And I wanted to just remind you guys that we are at chapter 2 titled Innocence, because it is about the lifespan development stage of infancy and all the wonderful life lessons that we can extrapolate from that time in our lives. All kinds of interesting life lessons. For example, having a voice. I think that infants have a direct connection to their voice directly out of the womb. I think it's very interesting that they don't have any shame or restraint around that. And it is our life later on where we are finding balance and just impacted by the things we experience that shape our voice. Some good things and some bad things. So we're going to learn a balance to fit in society, in a community, and that's very important. And however, there's, trauma that happens in our life, and that sort of breaks up a healthy relationship to our voice. And I'll get into that in another episode, but today I really want to keep it light. And so we're just going to get straight into why having a voice is so important. And having a voice is more than just being loud or having a ton of opinions. Our voice is inextricably tied to our identity. We speak ourselves into existence using our words, using our voice, using language. And through this process of speaking ourselves into existence, we're also having a process of self-discovery that's happening simultaneously. So we are building an identity alongside speaking our identity. That is, I think, a cool concept. The self-expression of our unique identity. It's a fundamental human need. We all need to be seen and heard and accepted, hopefully loved for who we are, exactly as we are. And our identity changes over time with, the life experiences and the knowledge that we accrue, this wisdom, knowledge and experience, that's wisdom. And that will change our voice as we evolve as human, as maturing individuals, right? And so this journey of self-expression, getting to know what we genuinely value, what our beliefs are, what do we truly feel and think about. So we express ourselves and we build ourselves at the same time. So I'm just going to take a few breaths because I kind of got into a little spiel right there. And I don't want to talk too fast either. So let me just breathe a little sec. And how do we use our voice? And there's a whole bunch of different ways because our voice is basically just a symbolic way of expressing ourselves. Any kind of self-expression, in my eyes, counts as our voice. So it's not just the dialogue we have with people, this sharing of ideas, the talking to other people. It really is any kind of self-expression. Our art, our dancing, our writing, any way that you express who you are, even our actions. If you're someone who really likes to help the neighbors, help them with their mail, help them with their groceries, bring it inside. If you're someone who's, really easily impatient and you snap at other people, or maybe you're someone who, loves to cook and host parties. These actions, they give a little bit of insight into who you are as a person. They don't necessarily define us. Our actions don't necessarily define us, but they do give us some tidbits of information about who we are. And so I think our voices, it doesn't matter, again, if it's through writing or speaking, like I have had personal journals and diaries since I was 7 years old. Even till today, I have personal journals that I write in. And, I just wrote down all my silly little thoughts ever since I was a kid. But what's fun about that is I get to see what my headspace was at. What were my likes, my dislikes? What was my thinking patterns? What did I complain about? What were my hopes and dreams? What were my reasoning skills? What was my healing journey looking like through all the steps throughout my life? Technically, this is all documented. And so my story, in a sense, is written down. And, I get to know myself even more by revisiting those. Any way you express yourself is using your voice. That, in my book, that's what that is. And having an authentic voice is what's most important, because you can't, having a voice, having your own voice is probably what I think defines a healthy relationship with your voice. If I can give an example of why it wouldn't be good to use an inauthentic voice, which I think is natural. I think everybody does that, but let me just sort of try and explain what that would look like. So if, for example, I think that, I'm telling everybody that I love hiking, and I'm telling everybody this because I think the image of this hiker girl that's super outdoorsy and fit and healthy and stuff, I think that image looks cool. But really, I like to sit down and read books, and I'd rather be connecting to people through, the different books we've read and storytelling and all that. But I keep telling, everybody that I like hiking because I think that, maybe reading books is kind of it doesn't seem as exciting. And, because I'm comparing myself or something. So I just keep telling everybody that I love hiking. I make a whole bunch of friends who love hiking. I get invited to all these hiking expeditions, and no one's really a big reader. So I have all these friends that are hikers, not readers. And, I might be surrounded by people, but I'm not connected or bonding with people necessarily because it's not my preferred way of bonding with people. There's a disconnect there. But I've used my voice in a sort of an irresponsible way because I'm not being true to who I really am. And then I find myself down a path where I feel disconnected from my relationships. And this is sort of a silly example, but, we do this all the time. We we have values that are not necessarily our own. We have goals that we strive for that we don't actually desire. You know, we're living our lives in a way. It's like we go A, B, C, D. Did you get the house? Did you get the kid? Did you get the job? Like, you know, are we actually analyzing if this is really how we want our lives to go? Have we ever sat down and asked ourselves that? So, again, like, I think that it's really important to just make sure that we're as authentic as possible with our voice, and it's okay if it changes over time, but just to, sit back and really try to just be our authentic authentic selves. And that way we're going to attract people that align with us, or, you know, even if they're not like-minded, at the very least they're compatible, because we're being our true selves from the get-go, you know. And sometimes we're afraid of being our authentic selves because it means, you know, we're afraid of embarrassing ourselves or not making enough friends, or we're not going to fit in. But we can use our voice, instead of focusing on using our voice to fit in, we can use our voice to as a tool to attract like-minded or compatible people. So, you know, it helps us in a way, having a healthy relationship with our voice. It helps keep the right people in our lives, and it helps us to release the people who are not meant to be in our lives. You know, we're not chasing after the wrong people. We surround ourselves with people where we would have a feeling of connection, which is fundamental to our well-being and to have a life that has a high degree of quality to it. So, you know, to really make sure you got the right people in your life. And this brings me to my next point, which is, you know, having a healthy relationship to our authentic voice. It's a protective factor. It keeps us safe from people who would want to hurt us. And an example for that would be bullies. Bullies at school thrive in environments where voices aren't used, and boundaries aren't implemented, and consequences don't come up for their bad behavior. They pick on kids. You know, I don't know how they find them, but they find them. They find kids who are disconnected from their voice and who are less likely to either stick up for themselves or go get a parent or a teacher or a guardian. And, you know, it's not just their victims in a sense, it's also their friends. Bullies will attract enabler type people who are also disconnected from their voice. Enablers won't challenge or disagree or correct the bully. And even if they feel really guilty and they regret participating in the bullying, enablers are afraid a lot of the time to be the next target, because the environment that the bully has orchestrated is one where, you know, there's fear, there's intimidation, there's fear of abandonment, there's codependency. But again, for someone to misuse their voice to harm others, they do need people to be disconnected from their voices. And this is bullies at school, but, you know, this is also a larger problem in society with people who really do have malicious intent towards other people. And I'm going to get into a full-on podcast episode about that. But I do want to keep this episode light because I do have to check the boxes behind the scenes if an episode is safe for kids or not. And so I'd like to keep this one light so that I can, you know, keep it safe for everyone. But I would like to get into the more darker parts. And even if I think everyone would benefit from this information, just for today, we're going to keep it a little light. So, our voice is a protective factor, but it's also interesting to contemplate what a healthy relationship, a healthy relationship with our authentic voice, what it feels like, because again, if I look back on my life, the times where I was disconnected from my voice, I was either really, really quiet and not sticking up for myself because of some harm. But there's also parts of my life where I was very, very loud, and I was disconnected from my voice in that way too, because I was inadvertently pushing people away because I did not realize the impact of my words and what I was saying. And I had some very extreme views. I was very loud. And, I was getting into arguments with people, and I was like, stubborn about it, and really, again, just like not really understanding what I was saying necessarily. And so I only realized this because when I was holding these extreme views, I believed that I was doing something good. I believed that I was bringing about social change, and I had an identity of, social change maker and whatnot. But it wasn't until I was faced with some extreme views that I really didn't agree with, and I was seeing that I didn't feel safe disagreeing with my peers. And so that's when I really came to realize that like my voice was not being used appropriately. It wasn't authentic, and I didn't even feel safe expressing disagreement with people who I thought would understand a difference of opinion. So I really took a step back, and I was like, okay, even if I am uncomfortable with realizing how much my voice is influenced by outside pressure, I'm happy that I came to that realization, even if it was uncomfortable, because once it was in my awareness, then I could work on it. Then I could make some changes to really make sure that the things that come out of my mouth reflect who I am as a person. And if I really, I know me. No one knows me more than I know me. No one gets full access to my thoughts and my feelings the way that I do. So I get to decide what is my value system, what are the things that I believe in, and I have to let relationships play out how they are. If it creates conflicts, and then that's what it is, and I can just let the relationships play out the way that they naturally would, the moment that I start being authentic about what I actually believe. So, and sometimes, it still happens where I will say things because there's so much programming happening all the time from outside sources. So even till today, I don't know, I'll be in therapy and I'll say something and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea that impacted me so much, or that I don't actually believe what I just said, what came out of my mouth. Like, I don't actually believe that. But sometimes externalizing it allows it to come into our awareness. So I would never be afraid of saying what you have to say and externalizing it, because even if you do say it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't define you, but it gives you information to work with. And a healthy relationship to our voice, that is going to look different from one individual to the next, right? Because the balance between speaking and listening, or, censorship or privacy versus full disclosure, like that is going to be different for different people. It is never, a healthy balance is not necessarily perfect equality, 50% talking, 50% listening. It's going to be more about equity rather than equality. Equity is like a harmony that's achieved through like sort of like a natural reciprocity based on individual differences. So I'm going to fall naturally a little bit more on the side of listening, right? But that doesn't mean I don't have speaking needs. But just in general, in my relationships, well, depending on the person and the circumstance, but in general, I fall more on the line of a listener. That is more who I am. I'm more on the quiet side, but again, like I have a podcast where I get full center stage to talk. So, everyone has different needs, but this is how I feel comfortable speaking the most. And, but just in general, I like listening. I have, again, no problem with censorship necessarily. I think it's very healthy to really weigh our words and to make sure that we're speaking in a way that benefits everyone involved, without going into the extreme where you're feeling completely uncomfortable to talk. And maybe I'm someone who would benefit from speaking up a bit more around people. And maybe that's part of my healing journey, But I do find a balance for myself, and it looks different than the balance of my friends or my husband. That's what's so great about life, is everyone is different and it's going to look different. My personal definition of balance is going to look different than someone else's, and I get to choose what is good for me. And one part about life, especially when you're young, it's all really a big learning process. But we learn about when it's, when to speak and when to choose privacy. Before, I really thought that, I had to be completely able to speak whatever was on my mind. But, I also learned a valuable lesson about choosing privacy and, choosing listening or silence to keep my peace, not to keep the peace between people, but silence in order to keep my peace, my own personal sense of peacefulness, because some people are dead, they're absolutely determined to misunderstand us. And, you get to choose who has the privilege of building a solid connection. You get to choose who gets access to your inner world, and that is a very precious thing to protect. So protecting your peace for the sake of your well-being is a very important thing to learn. And sometimes, again, if you're surrounded by people or someone, particularly impactful to you that is dedicated to misunderstanding you, then that's tough. That's really tough. But you get to decide if you're going to use your voice or if you choose privacy. So I'd like to take a few more minutes to talk about ways in which I have found to get in touch with my authentic voice, because sometimes we don't know how to do that. So one of the most important things I would say is to understand your life story and to respect it and to honor it, because life is hard, right? Things happen to us. Trauma happens, all kind of stuff happens. So it's really important to have compassion for your story, to have love for yourself, and to understand your journey and how far you've come, right? That is extremely powerful when it comes to your voice, because, again, your story, your identity, your voice, all of that is linked together, right? And, we talked a little bit about extremes, but understanding the extremes and finding your own spot in the balance, that's super helpful to pinpoint where you are on things and to use your voice in a way that actually really truly reflects who you are. And sometimes, when we're on one side of the extreme, we tend to overcorrect. I didn't have a connection to my voice, so to make up for that, I was super loud. And both of those extremes were not me. I'm somewhere in the middle. And so understanding those extremes is really, and you know, my extreme is going to look different than someone else's extreme, right? So just understanding your own personal extremes and finding a middle ground that speaks to you and that you relate to, that you feel good in, and that your well-being is priority. I think, you know, having an understanding of what you really want, like what is a perfect day to you? What is the perfect career? What are the perfect life circumstances for you? And to incorporate more of those things in it, because the more that we have a life that reflects who we are, the easier it is to find our voice, and the easier it is to have an authentic relationship with ourselves, because we're living a life that is unique to us. And a lot of the time people are chasing lives that are sort of this like imposed image of what we're supposed to want, but really decide that for yourself, you know, and yeah, describe a perfect day. Describe a perfect life. Not just the like good vacations, but the perfect life, day to day, where you wouldn't need a vacation to recuperate from your life from. You'd be, you know, having a vacation would just be extra because you're living your life exactly the way that you want. What would that look like for you? And the last thing I'm going to say, this one's a little bit more on the spiritual side, but I think this one is really fun, and it has to do with NDEs. So I don't know who knows about NDEs. Those are near-death experiences. So this might not be, I might not be able to keep this safe for everybody, but you know, near-death experiences. It is basically this thing that happens that like science can't explain, and that spirituality sort of explains as this journey to, I don't know if it's the afterlife or whatever, but you know, it's always a near-death experience is usually characterized by the same things. There's this sort of tunnel of light, or this traveling towards you know, what the universe, or whatever you want to call it, universe, source, God, whatever. And they get there, and there's like an assembly of people that you know, that you love, maybe they've passed. And so you kind of just linger there and kind of have some sort of life review where you go through all the experiences of your life, and, you know, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And you're sort of like a little detached from it. So you're able to kind of put the cards on the table and look at things and just be like, okay, well, this is my life, and this is what I've done, and these, you know, these are the horrible things, and these are the great things. And, you know, am I happy with did I fulfill my destiny that I'm supposed to? No. Okay, you have to go back and blah. So there's, you know, I've been watching some podcasts about that. I think it's so fun. But anyway, and there's something that I do that I never realized was sort of like part of NDE, but something I've done for very long, ever since I was very young. I gave myself my own life reviews. So I would, every couple of years, like I would say every 2 years, starting pretty young, I don't know exactly when, but probably in adolescence, I would start asking myself, you know, if I had 3 more days to go on this planet, would I be happy with my life? Have I made the choices that make me proud? Have I completed the things that I want to complete? Or is there still some unfinished business? Is there apologies I need to make? Is there some rectifying, some resolutions that need to happen? And, you know, it helped me to correct some of the stuff that I needed to correct. You know, again, I tout myself as a Jane of all trades, and I changed careers. I would change schools. I would start over. I moved to a different city. And a lot of these things, if I changed a relationship or, made some new connections, some new friends, it was often because of these like life reviews I would give myself. And it's basically, I just ask, am I happy with what I'm doing right now? If I had a week to live, if I had, one day to live, who would I spend that time with? What would I be doing? Where would I be going? How would I spend my time? And would I change things? And I know that a lot of people, if we have a week to go, you ain't going into work. You're going to spend it with the people you love most. You're going to be doing all of the things that you wanted to do, and you're going to get them done in that week. And so it kind of helps to put our lives in perspective a little bit. And I think giving ourselves a life review, even though it's, it could be considered a little morbid because it's like really taking a look at your mortality, but this relationship with the relationship with our mortality and facing our mortality at a young age, it does help us to make the choices that align with us the most. And I would take some time to sit down and do that. And some of the hard decisions that I needed to make, but I'm so glad I made them because it led me to where I want to be right now. Like I'm living as authentically as I can be right now. And thanks in part to a sort of ability to give myself life reviews every once in a while. And really just to make sure that I'm on the right track. So anyway, I'm going to stop this here. So I think that this is a pretty interesting episode. I hope that everyone benefits from them. I hope that, you can have this strength of character to express yourself authentically. I wish that for everyone. I hope that you understand how important it is in terms of protecting yourself and also just expressing who you are and knowing yourself intimately, honoring your life story and using your voice to make sure that there's a high quality of love and care and connection in your life due to you being who you are. And releasing people that are not meant for you, but, really keeping those who are meant for you and who lift you up and who help you to be more yourself. So, I think I'll end that here. I just hope that everyone, gets something out of this, is inspired in some way, maybe. If it at all helps us to have a capacity to be closer to ourselves or to use our voice in order to help other people who don't have access to your voice, to help encourage others to build a strong, healthy bond with themselves and to not be afraid to use their voice of who they are, responsibly, using their voice responsibly as well. I think that this is all important stuff. So on that note, I will end it. Let's be the change that we want to see in the world. I hope that you take good care of yourselves and take good care of those that are near and dear to your heart. Take care.